Hello and welcome everybody. A startup does not become a scale-up because it raises funding. It becomes a scale-up because someone buys from it repeatedly at scale. In the previous episode of this series, we examined the European capital architecture, the institutional LP allocation patterns, the fund size math at Series B, the capital markets union as a keystone reform. The conclusion was that Europe does not lack venture capital. It lacks the architecture to move that capital from innovation to scale. That analysis was necessary. It is not sufficient because even if European founders had access to deep, patient, long-duration growth capital tomorrow, if the Megafund gap closed overnight, if pension allocation tripled, if the capital markets union became operational, European startups would still face a second structural problem. They would still struggle to find customers. The United States does not only finance technology companies aggressively, it also deploys their products aggressively. American pension funds buy from American AI startups. American hospitals buy from American health tech startups. American federal agencies buy from American GovTech startups. American Fortune 500 enterprises buy from American B2B software startups. In Europe, that deployment cycle runs differently, slower, more cautious, more fragmented across member states, more risk-averse at an institutional level. The result is a scaling gap that exists independent of the capital gap. I'm Jörn Menninger. This is Startup.io. This is episode 4 of our series, The European Scale-Up Question. We are going inside the demand side, and my argument is this: Europe builds innovation. Too often it does not become the first large-scale customer of its own innovation. Let's build this carefully. Why demand matters more than funding. Start with the observation that should organize this entire episode. Capital keeps startups alive. Demand turns them into dominant companies. That distinction matters because it changes how you read the European scale-up gap. If the problem is capital, the levers are financial, institutional LP reallocation, fund size reform, capital markets union. If the problem is also demand, the levers are different. They are procurement systems, buyer culture, enterprise risk tolerance, public sector adoption velocity. Both levers must move. Pulling one without the other does not close the gap. Here is the underlying mechanism. Revenue is non-dilutive capital. A startup that secures large customers does 4 things at once. It finances growth internally, it validates its product to the market, it improves investor confidence by providing the commercial thesis, and it gains operational data faster than competitors who are still searching for the product market fit. A startup that cannot convert institutions into customers remains dependent on external investors for longer. Each additional funding round costs equity, costs management attention, costs months of operational momentum. When a company gains enterprise contracts, becomes embedded into critical workflows, or secures public sector deployment, it gains 4 things: recurring revenue, institutional legitimacy, operational learning at scale, and scaling momentum that compounds. The US ecosystem combines deep venture financing with aggressive enterprise adoption. The two reinforce each other. Capital chases revenue. Revenue justifies capital. The cycle accelerates. Europe often separates the two. There is venture capital. There are startups. There are corporates. But the bridge between them, the procurement contract, the framework agreement, the public sector pilot that converts to deployment, runs slower. Funding builds the runway. Demand determines whether a company actually takes off. This is the frame for everything we examine in this episode. The procurement friction problem. Now look at the demand side at scale. Public procurement across the European Union represents approximately 14% of EU gross domestic product GDP. Approximately 2 trillion with a T euros annually. Europe does not lack purchasing power. The question is whether enough of that purchasing power functions as a launch market for innovative companies. The answer is not nearly enough. The public procurement systems in Europe remain fragmented, highly procedural, compliance heavy, and risk minimizing. Each member state operates its own framework. Each ministry within a member state operates its own procurement rules. Large incumbents are often favored because they reduce perceived procurement risk. They already satisfy framework requirements. They possess compliance infrastructure built over decades. They have institutional trust embedded across multiple buying cycles. Young companies struggle to become first vendors. They struggle to become infrastructure providers. They struggle to become strategic suppliers. That matters especially in 5 sectors where the next decade of competitive advantage will be decided: AI, cybersecurity, GovTech, healthcare, and infrastructure software. These are the sectors where the first large-scale customers often shape standards, ecosystems, and eventual platform dominance. In our conversation with Anna Christmann, Germany's former digital commissioner, she walked us through Germany's 10-point startup strategy. Point 7 of that strategy is titled, quote, Mobilize Startup Competencies for Public Contracts. This is the right framing. The execution is actually a bit harder. European public procurement reform has been discussed at the Commission level in the letter report in OECD analysis for over a decade. Progress is real but slow. The structural incentive to favor incumbents driven by procurement officials' rational personal risk management does not respond quickly to top-down policy. The result is what I want to give a name. Europe often finances innovation experimentally while purchasing infrastructure conservatively. That asymmetry is structurally costly. The enterprise procurement layer reinforces the same pattern. Large European enterprises move more cautiously than many comparable US firms. They integrate new vendors more slowly. They favor multi-year framework agreements with established suppliers. They allocate longer evaluation periods. They demand more compliance certification. European startups, as a result, scale revenue more slowly. They gather deployment data more slowly. They improve their products more slowly. They compound operational learning more slowly. This is what I will call the deployment velocity gap. The first scaling bottleneck is often not capital, it's procurement velocity. That phrase is uncomfortable for founders to hear. They want the problem to be the round size, the term sheet, the investor pipeline, because those are problems they can attack directly. Procurement velocity is much harder to attack. It sits inside institutions they do not control, but it is the binding constraint more often than capital constraint, especially at the moment a company tries to transition from product market fit to scale. The AI infrastructure risk. There's a sector where the deployment problem becomes existential, not just inconvenient, existential. That sector is AI. AI systems do not improve through invention alone. They improve through deployment, through usage scale, through workflow integration, through operational feedback loops, through compute accumulation tied to real-world data. In traditional software, delayed procurement means delayed revenue. The pain is financial. The company survives even if it grows more slowly. In AI, delayed procurement also means delayed learning, delayed data accumulation, slower model improvement. The pain becomes compounding. This changes the strategic calculus entirely. The regions that deploy AI systems fastest, integrate them most deeply, and become the earliest large-scale buyers will do three things. They'll shape standards, they'll accumulate operational advantage, and they will reinforce platform dominance for the next infrastructure cycle. Europe's risk in the AI era is specific and underappreciated. Europe may regulate AI heavily. Europe may research AI effectively. Europe may even fund AI startups at the early stages competently. And Europe may still, at the same time, deploy foreign AI infrastructure at scale because European institutional buyers move too slowly to adopt European AI systems before US providers establish their workflows. AI leadership is not determined only by invention, it is determined by deployment. The Draghi report on the European competitiveness makes a related point at the strategic level: strategic autonomy, infrastructure dependency, sovereignty over critical computational systems. Draghi is precise about it. A Europe that buys its AI infrastructure abroad becomes structurally dependent in a way that no amount of domestic research output can offset. If Europe does not become the first large-scale customer of its own AI systems, it risks becoming structurally dependent on external infrastructure. That sentence is the strategic stake of this episode. It is also the reason demand cannot be treated as a soft problem alongside the hard problem of capital. Both are hard, both are structural, and both do compound. The trust and liability problem. Now, look at the mechanism behind the procurement caution. European procurement systems are shaped by three factors that interact: trust, logic, liability, minimization, and institutional caution. Public agencies and large enterprises often optimize for avoiding mistakes rather than maximizing innovation speed. That optimization is rational locally. A procurement officer who selects a young vendor that fails carries personal career risk. A procurement officer who selects the incumbent and pays a slight premium carries no career risk, even if the institutional outcome is suboptimal. The safest procurement decision becomes, predictably, buying from incumbents, renewing existing vendors, delaying adoption decisions until other peers have adopted first. This behavior is rational at the individual level. Systematically, it slows scaling, weakens domestic demand, and advantages large incumbent platforms. There's a name for this dynamic that I want to introduce: the incumbent premium. Large established vendors benefit not only from scale, brand, and capital depth, they often benefit from institutional trust inertia. Buyers default to them because the cost of defaulting is zero. The cost of switching to a young vendor is unknown and pretty personal. That premium is invisible in pricing data. It does not appear as a line item, but it is one of the most consequential dynamics in European B2C and B2G, meaning business to government, markets. Europe's procurement systems are often optimized to avoid failure, not accelerate adoption. For founders, this has a direct operational implication. The sales cycle into European institutional buyers is not just longer, it is structurally harder to compress. Speed is not a feature buyers reward in this context. Certainty is the feature buyers reward, and certainty, by definition, occurs to incumbents. The reform agenda at EU level, at national level, in published procurement strategies is aware of this. We have to say that. The fixes are known: strategic procurement frameworks, innovation partnerships, pre-commercial procurement, set aside thresholds for SMEs and startups. These tools exist on paper. Their operational deployment remains uneven across member states. Germany as a case study. Germany illustrates the broader European contradiction clearly, as it did in the architecture analysis. Germany has strong industrial bias, world-class manufacturing companies, deep engineering expertise, strong Mittelstand demand for B2B software automation and process integration. The buying potential is enormous, but enterprise adoption cycles remain cautious, compliance heavy, integration intensive. The procurement process at a mid-sized industrial Mittelstand company often involves 6 to 11-month evaluation cycles, multi-stakeholder committees, mandatory security and data residency certification, and reference customers of comparable size and sector. This cycle is rational from the buyer's perspective. It is brutal for young startup trying to compress sales velocity. The procurement culture in Mittelstand companies, which we examined in our analysis of Germany's hidden champions, is relationship-driven and consensus-based. Sales cycles of 6 to 12 months are standard. Decisions are made by committees that include the CTO, the CFO, and the operations lead. All three must be convinced. That process produces durable revenue once won. It produces slow scaling for vendors trying to compress the timeline. The public sector layers adds another dimension. Public sector digital adoption in Germany remains fragmented, federalized, administratively slow moving. The DE Hubs initiative, described in our conversation with Thomas Jatzombeck, is a deliberate response to that fragmentation. 12 federal innovation hubs, local industry pitching to host them, startup factories at university level. The architecture is decentralized by design because German federalism makes top-down deployment impossible. Anna Christmann's Startup Strategy Framework, Point 7, Mobilize Startup Competencies for Public Contracts, explicitly names the procurement gap as a strategic priority. The implementation has been slow, not because the policy is wrong, because the federal and state procurement layer is genuinely difficult to reform from any single ministry. Germany is trying to modernize startup infrastructure while still operating historically conservative procurement systems. The contradiction is honest, not hidden. Germany successfully builds engineering-intensive startups. The harder question is whether its institutions buy from them fast enough to let them scale. That question is not unique to Germany. France faces a version of it through its public procurement preferences for national champions. The Nordics face it through their sustainability and regulatory filters. The Netherlands faces it through its conservative enterprise adoption cycles. The pattern is structural across the European continent.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.